Production numbers for the 2016 growing season will be finalized in January, but as it stands, Nebraska is expected to tie Illinois for the top soybean yield in the country. The projected 62 bushels per acre would be a record for both states and 3 bushels an acre above the next closest producer. To recap disease issues Nebraska farmers faced during the year and look ahead to inputs in 2017, we talked earlier this week with Nebraska Extension plant pathologist Loren Giesler.
Well, Jeff, this last year, every year we have seedling disease problems. Our soil temperatures were warmer though at planting, so we saw a little more phytophthora, I think, than the previous years. And then going into the season, we had great conditions for production, which favors some of those diseases. So again, we saw white mold to the north, sudden death syndrome, but wasn't quite as severe as in 2015. And then we had frog eye again showing up in a lot of places.
Let's talk about the 2017 growing season as farmers start to think about their inputs here. Some of the research that you've done on seed treatments, tell me whether or not you think they're effective.
Well, the key with seed treatment fungicides is if you're going into a stressful planting condition or soils that are cooler, and an optimum germination for soybeans 60 degrees. So currently with the ground frozen and the forecast, it looks like maybe we'll be going into those conditions where we'll have cool temperatures. When we have cooler soil temperatures and we're putting soybeans in the ground and they're stressed and that seedling's just slow to emerge, that's when it's more susceptible for seedling disease. So that's in general where we tend to see more benefit. A lot of our studies in 2016, we didn't show any return again from seed treatments. So with that said, though, a farmer that has a history of a stand problem, that knows he has problem fields, in general, I'd still recommend seed treatment fungicides in those fields. The other one is when we start looking at reducing seed population and seeding rates. Any of us that do this type of research, you pretty much predict if you're going to have an effect, you're going to maximize that effect when you reduce that seeding rate because you're reducing population. You're counting on each of those plants to make it.
So outside of those two conditions, would you say seed treatments are a no-go?
Well, I hate to say no-go because as soon as you do, then you have a problem, right? But it really depends on what that history is in that field. So if you have no history, you've got great soils, and you always have good stands, your benefit is going to be really limited. As we look at pushing that window, planting earlier and earlier to try to maximize yield, which I still encourage, that's where, then I would sure use that seed treatment in that situation when you're really early to get that benefit. But once you get to that window where those soils are, approaching 60 degrees and above, for sure, the benefit is going to be limited to none.
More about planting populations. What area here, what range do you think is workable?
Well, I think one thing that all farmers should really assess with the current economy is their population seeding rate. And if you look at the studies that have been done, there's such a range of seeding rates. When we did our soybean management field days studies this last year, we had growers anywhere from 200,000 to 165,000 seeding rates. In those situations, usually those are really excessive and above, what we'd recommend typically at the university in that 125, 120 seeding rate. Now, again, though, if a farmer has a field that they know crust, they need a higher seeding density maybe to get those seeds up, things like that, that's where reducing down to there may not be effective. But if you have really good soils, you've got great emergence, you can drill that population down to that 120, 125 zone.
Tell me more about row spacing and how it can impact a lot of different things in soybean production.
So as a pathologist with row spacing, the thing that always comes up is white mold. So if we reduce row width, in general, we increase our potential for white mold. So a farmer in northeast Nebraska that consistently has white mold problems, and they're significant, reducing row width may not be effective. But in general, in all the studies that have been conducted, that 15-inch row width is going to yield better than 30-inch rows. And it varies in response, but anywhere from 2 to, 6, 7 bushel per acre, depending on the situation again. The other thing to consider with row width, if a producer's set up to do 15-inch row widths, I think that's great. We even see some drills out there at 7.5s. 15, I think, is optimum. When we look at that, though, too, then you have to consider with all the resistant weed issues, that potential for problems. If they at 30 versus narrow, where they'll get better canopy and manage those weeds better.
You can find more information about disease management and seed treatments through links on the Market Journal homepage.